Okay. Wheelchair-bound child was sent for OT. Can't hold a pencil. You'd give your left arm and leg if he could jump rope, do monkey bars, or anything else on this list. Very good, very discouraging to receive this. And I'm sorry that that's what you received because there's no excuse for it. Um, I understand the limitations that have occurred over the past couple months with regards to these closures. So it's not that I'm unsympathetic to school staff, and in a lot of cases, the added stress and anxiety of trying to figure out how to serve the kids because there wasn't a lot of direction given because when they shut down. And then they shut down for a couple of weeks before they popped everybody about a week in advance with this thing of, hey, you're going to have to sit there and come up with distant learning and figure out how to do it, even though we've never done it. And it's got to be done on this mass scale. And it's got to be done under the standard of good faith. And of course, I think that there was a lot of administrations hoping that they would get these broad waivers from the federal government that never happened. And therefore, they didn't really prepare their staff in how to implement this. And in many cases, it is a case by case situation. But I will say, by and large, this is an administrative issue, and it's sort of laid bare for everybody who the good leaders are and who the bad leaders are. Because if they didn't understand how to lead, then that was going to be glaringly obvious during this shutdown. And those are going to be the districts that did a horrible job when it came to distant learning. Now, at the same time, there's going to be pockets to where you had very good leadership, very good resources, but yet the teacher wasn't good or the related service provider wasn't good with implementation. And that happens as well. Okay, so like I said, I'm not unsympathetic to the chain of events because I do recognize that it was a last minute thing. Um, at the same time, things like this, I mean, how difficult is it really to look at the worksheets and the stuff that you're sending to parents um, to know that that's not applicable to the child that you're supposed to serve on an individualized basis? Because at that point, it just, I mean, it's offensive. I mean, and it also, if it's not offensive, it sort of sends a message to the parent that number one, you don't care. Number two, you may not even know the child, which then puts the question in the back of the parent's mind of, did my child even receive these services? If this person is so daft that they're sending this worksheet home saying, hey, work with this on my child, and then my child can't do any of these things, well, I mean, it just doesn't send a positive message, doesn't send a message that reinforces confidence in that particular instructor. And quite frankly, that's going to be a huge um, issue across the board because I can tell you your child is one of those that distant learning isn't their learning style. Um, it's all we had at the time, but that's also where, for example, my child isn't a good distant learning person either. So we just told our school system that we're not doing anything for the next 2 months, so don't worry about it. What we're going to do is we're going to take this shutdown period and we're just going to move it over to June and July. And, of course, I was banking on the fact that at least some of the therapeutic providers that interact with my daughter paid for through the school system we're going to reopen. Well, they're reopening. So what I was hoping would happen back in March and April, it looks like that's going to come to fruition. So um, it is something to where that's what I recommend is some kind of negotiation with your school system if you have a child in this kind of particular situation. But I can tell you, I'm really disappointed in what I'm hearing with regards to related service providers and what they just absolutely haven't provided. Because well, there's companies out there like elumatherapy.com that they have an entire business model regarding teletherapy support for school in speech language pathology, in behavioral services, in mental health, in occupational therapy, and physical therapy, those kind of things. And if there's private companies out there that have these business models, then that tells me that it can be done. Now, is some of this stuff going to be sort of exploratory, because I'm sure that there's going to be some occupational therapists or PTs that are like, I don't know if if that can be done effectively, or if it, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that companies exist that do provide those options. So I'm not afraid of trying new things. Okay. I'm all about that. I absolutely abhor people who sit there and they stick their feet in the ground and say, "Well, this is the only way we do it." Yeah, that's like the chicken in a pot. We the whole family tradition. We cut the chicken in half and put it in a pot because it makes it taste better. It's always how we've done it as a family. And finally, somebody asked Grandma why she does it that way. And her response is, well, we didn't have any money. It's just our pot couldn't fit a whole chicken. So out of convenience, we cut it in half and we put it, in order to make it work. But yes, successive generations were doing it that way, glorifying or coming up with their own, ideas to why it was being done that way. So people need to sit there and question those norms that we just habitually get ourselves into, and understand that as human beings, it's our time right now. There's no limitation on us as to what we have to believe and what we have to choose to do. That's all up here, and if you're not constantly checking yourself and checking your beliefs to ensure that you're progressing and it's a positive trajectory that you're on, or that the society you live in is on, guys, our time is going to be over soon, as far as our generation. And what are we going to be able to look back and say that we contributed to this mess? I mean, right now I'm sort of embarrassed. So to sit there and say, well, we can't do things because of, what? We can't do things because of the shutdown. That's just lazy thinking. There were some limitations. Yes, I fully recognize that there's not enough occupational therapists anywhere in any state to serve the amount of need that truly exists inside of our public schools. And far too many schools, and you may not know this as a parent, I think educators know this, they overcommit the occupational therapists, give them far more students than they're able to truly handle. But yet they can't really say much about it because, most of them have bosses that are not occupational therapists making decisions on somebody's licensure and what they're ethically required to do for best practice. You have non-occupational therapists ordering them around. That's the nature of public education. That's my problem with speech language. That's my problem with behavior analytics inside school, is that they have licensure requirements. Occupational therapists, PTs, all these people have licensure requirements separate and different than teachers and educators. Yet administrators that are in administrative, they're not OTs. They're not speech language pathologists. They're not board certified behavior analysts. but yet they are making decisions for these professionals who have licenses, who have boards they answer to that isn't the Department of Education. They have ethics that are separate from that as an educator. They have ethics as opposed to best practice and ethical requirements per their expertise. They're what they are on your child's IEP team to abide by. But yet they're being ordered around by non-OTs and non-speech language pathologists and non-behavior analysts. And, it's not their license on the line, is it? Strapping you with, 600 kids on a caseload. I'm exaggerating that. It's 592. I don't know. But it's just one of those things to where that is the reality of what goes on with regards to our related service providers. So this distant learning thing really did expose some of those issues, because there were way too many kids for them to service in a logical manner for the amount of IEPs that they were committed to. And so most of them just handed out worksheets so that all of them were in the same boat. Well, what that did is it just exposed the school system to due process complaints, to mediation requests, to OCR complaints for not meeting that good faith standard. Because sending home these worksheets like this, ain't cut it. Does not cut it. And you would obviously be entitled to remedial services and a fair amount of those in order to lift your son back to where you had him. I'm sure that he had a slide, a tremendous slide during this shutdown. So what is your school system doing in response to that? You got to take that into consideration, okay? Now, this is to this particular parent because I know her, fortunate to get to know her, the law school buddy of mine. Went through that trial together. You have every capability to negotiate this. You have the tools, and you're justified in doing that. Okay.